From John chapter 4, verses 5 through 26. So he came to a Samaritan city called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired out by his journey, was sitting by the well. It was about noon. A Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." His disciples had gone to the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask a drink of me, a woman of Samaria?" Jews do not share things in common with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you have no bucket, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us the well and with his sons and his flocks drank from it?" Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But those who drink of the water that I will give them will never be thirsty. The water that I will give them will become in them a spring of water gushing up to eternal life." The woman said to her, "Sir, give me this water so that I may never be thirsty or have to keep coming here to draw water." Jesus said to her, "Go, call your husband and come back." The woman answered him, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You are right in saying, 'I have no husband,' for you have had 5 husbands, and the one you have now is not your husband. What you have said is true." The woman said to him, "Sir, I see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you say that the place where people must worship is in Jerusalem." Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will worship the Father, neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming, and is now here, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for the Father seeks such as these to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth." The woman said to him, "I know that the Messiah is coming, who is called Christ. When he comes, he will proclaim all things to us." Jesus said to her, "I am he, the one who is speaking to you." The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God. All right. I would love to invite forward our panel for today. If you haven't been with us this up till now, and you're not connected through email or anything, you may not know we've been doing a sermon series called Biblical Race Theory. It's a cute name to play off of the fact that in the news a lot lately we've been hearing a lot about critical race theory. And for the last 3 weeks we kind of did a sermon series walking through what the Bible says about race and setting both critical race theory like alongside and also counter to, even in moments, what a biblical theory of race. And so it's been so fruitful for me to do the research myself, a lot of work, but it's been really, really good for me. But also I have loved hearing your stories. And so last week I said, there's so many stories that I've been getting through email and just even side conversations. People, a lot, women mostly filled my inbox. Lots of paragraphs, but also side conversations from men too, who have been processing and processing their own story and processing how it feels to be here. And I felt like today needed to be a day that you heard from them. And so I'd love to invite forward our panel. And as they're coming forward, come on down. And as they're coming forward, I'll tell you who they are. We have Ryan Battle. We have Marcos Correa. And you don't have to sit in order. And I'm not like, this is Cheryl Williams, Carolyn Ricks, and Alex Trivkoska. Yeah, I'll sit right here. Perfect. So like I said, we have been in a series on race, and so some of these folks sitting up here have emailed me some of their stories, and some of them haven't, and some of these stories are going to be new to me as I'm hearing them unfold, and some of them I might know. And so I ask that you all, as I will also be, I think I got a text, was there anything that y'all talked about that I should know about? I'm like, we're just going to kind of let the Spirit lead this in the direction it goes. Although it's planned, I promise you I have questions. But also knowing that as these stories unfold, as we hear from them, this conversation may be a little bit more fluid. And we want to leave room for that. I also ask that you all that this would be a really sacred place as you hear their stories today. That this would be, that you would read their stories like you would read the Bible. So to start off, again, this is Cheryl, Marcos, Ryan, Carolyn, and Alex. And so I invite, I think all of you, I think everybody would love to know more about you. And so would you just introduce yourselves? And Brett's going to handle the mic situation. Yeah, there you go. Would you introduce yourselves and share a little bit about your background, your culture, your ethnicity, like where you grew up, your family of origin, kind of share a little bit about who you are, where you come from. Yeah.
Good morning, Good morning, everyone. Again, Cheryl Williams. Born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. Grew up I'm African American. Grew up in a home led by a single parent, my mom, and the oldest of three. I will add this before moving on. There was an understanding in my home that because we were African American, that we pretty much knew all about African American culture. But as I got older, I realized I didn't know as much as I probably should have known. So I'll leave that teaser.
Now I need a teaser. All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Marcos Correa. Marcos Correa, because that's when I say that, people are like, "What did you say?" For those who don't know, Correa actually means belt in Spanish. So I am born and raised from San Antonio, Texas. Been in this area for about 17 years. I have I think, a unique background. So my dad was Mexican from Guadalajara, Mexico, and then moved to Mexico City. On my mom's side, I have a mix, but predominantly Polish background. Wisnowski, from the Wisnowski heritage lineage, if you will, from Krakow, Poland, and Mexican. So sometimes I say I'm Mexipolish American. Go figure. I was very excited and humbled that Pastor Michelle reached out to me. Obviously born and raised in San Antonio, in a predominantly Hispanic city of San Antonio, Texas. I didn't really see race. It wasn't through a lens of race that I lived my life. Moving up here 17 years ago, as I said, it was one of the first times I was introduced to the beauty of different races. Met now my husband, Christopher Brown, who is interracial himself, adopted our daughter, who is interracial herself, and it's just been a breathtaking experience to see and to be exposed to what race means and how it's tied to, I think, everyday life. And I hope to continue to educate myself even to this day now, especially for my daughter, to expose her to her race, her background is just equal as important. For her to also learn about my race, my background. Quick story is, my mom comes and visits every so often, and my mom makes authentic Mexican food, and Harper is a huge fan of tortillas, and she's like, tortillas. And I just think, I wonder what would have happened. Who knew this little girl would have grown up as, being so in love with that culture. So thank you.
Good morning. My name is Ryan Battle. I grew up here in Northern Virginia. I actually went to high school here for a year here at Hayfield. I grew up in a African American household. I attended I would say 99.9% African American church, one of the oldest black churches in the area. I was a third generation, so my grandparents went there, my mom went there, and then I went there, and then my son was baptized there. But through that lens, I went to a middle school and a high school that was very diverse, where white and black kids were the minority and not the majority. And so going to church on Sunday, like you only see people that look like you and are kind of in your circle, but then you go back out into the real world and everyone looks different. Like you're not surrounded by the same all the time. And so that was an eye-opening experience and a real change, especially when I went to college, where I would meet kids that were from other schools in the state of Tennessee, because I went to University of Tennessee, and they would say, oh, I went to the all-black high school in town or the all-white high school. And me being naive, coming from Northern Virginia, like that just didn't exist here. That just wasn't a thing. And so that was a huge culture shock to me. But I will leave that as a nugget to come back to. But yeah, one of the other things growing up that was ingrained in me is that there were 3 funeral homes in Alexandria, and if you were white, you went to one funeral home, and if you were black, you went to one of the 2 black funeral homes, and that's just kind of how it was. So, being 8, 9, 10 years old, you just were like, oh, okay, but then as you got older, you kind of started thinking through, like, why is that a thing? Why does that matter? So, but that's just the beginning. So.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Ricks. I also, like Ryan, grew up in this area. My dad is from Alabama, and my mom was from Ohio. They met in college, and excuse me. My dad had 2 offers. He could go back to work in Alabama, or he could work in the Washington metro area. And I feel that, he told us that decision was to come here was so that we would have, my siblings and I would have a really diverse experience, opportunities to meet a greater number of people than he may have had when he was growing up. So I think that's really shaped a lot of my personal experience, my siblings' experience. And the church where we attended was particularly diverse, so I guess this is my nugget kind of to one of the other questions. So I guess my kind of, my nugget word is longing. So.
Hi, good morning. Alexandra Terpkowska. I'll say the Macedonian too. I appreciate that. Alexandra Terpkowska. So just as a way of introduction, my family and I moved to the U.S. from Macedonia in 1998. I was 14 years old, and I was watching Beverly Hills 90210, the original version, back home. And I thought that my brother and I coming to the U.S., to Detroit, Michigan, was going to be very similar to like Brandon in LA. So it wasn't. And even though, I knew geography really well, I didn't know enough about culture and like just different dynamics and stuff like that. So what was interesting is that right away at school, whether it was because I had a thick accent or because like I was in bilingual English 3, I was embraced as diverse. And so for me, that was really different because in Macedonia, a country of about 2 million people, I would say almost everybody looks alike. And so about 2/3 of the population is Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox, Macedonian Orthodox, depending on how the churches divide. And the other third is either Orthodox Albanians or Turkish people or Muslim Albanians, and there's a Gypsy population as well, so like, or Roma. So what was interesting is like, I think because it was post-communist, religion was so separated from how we practice traditions. So we did traditional things and we would go to church on big holidays, but we didn't read the Bible. So it wasn't anchored, because that was something that was prohibited by the government ages ago. So like our grandparents did stuff that were connected, and I see things now that stem in the Bible, but I had no appreciation for that. So what was really I mean, first it was a big culture shock coming to the U.S., but then I would say a lot of my friends were people who were diverse. So, and for us, what was interesting is like, we didn't see color, we saw heritage. So we talked about where we came from, because a lot of my friends were immigrants. So they came from Africa, they came from Asia, they came from other countries. So we were constantly sharing like traditions and cultures. And I would say, just in terms of like bringing religion back into my life and actually really connecting with religion came about after I was separated with my now ex-husband. I was trying to find a place to like belong, and I felt like talking about separation and divorce in my Macedonian cycle was something shameful. I think Orthodox is very similar to Catholic in a way. And so it was a lot of my African American friends or immigrant friends who actually like, they called on the phone and they prayed with me, saying out loud the things that weren't being said. And I think that I didn't experience that at any time with like my Macedonian tradition, like prayer was silent and you didn't talk about certain things, but I felt incredibly closer to God, incredibly like transparent, vulnerable, and just seen when my friends spoke those things. So I think I often say that I'm brought closer to life because of that, and closer to God because of that relationship. So happy to be here. Michelle, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, you kind of took us in a direction, Alex, talking about how you're, coming to America and being in relationship with people of diverse backgrounds and ethnicities has led you closer to God, right? Like led you closer to God. I want us to think about one thing that was said in the first week of the series, where we acknowledged that in this room, we would actually, Kingstowne would be considered by United Methodist standards a diverse church. I did the, whatever this even means, I don't know. We have somebody in our congregation who works for the Census Bureau, so they do this every day, right? But like whatever this, a census means, and how you even do it, that's, one of the questions that we were talking about earlier. It's like exactly 20%. 20% of our congregation, it would be considered non-white, I think. That's considered in the United Methodist Church a multi-ethnic church, which is just crazy. Tell me how that made, those of you who maybe, not everybody has to say, but tell me how that made you feel. I don't know, Carolyn, if I was thinking about you. Like, tell me what that does when you heard that. What did that do?
Nugget word, longing. So when you said that, I immediately kind of chuckled to myself, and I thought back to growing up in a United Methodist church that was, in my experience and my recollection, very diverse. By the time my family transitioned away from that church, when we had birthdays, we were singing it in 5 languages. So I can sing it in Tagalog, I can sing it in Spanish, I can sing it in French. So celebrating, Black History Month, celebrating Asian Pacific Islander Month, hearing, hymns or spiritual songs in Tagalog, having diverse leadership in our church. And I'm sure it wasn't always that way. And I know that church had gone through its own period of kind of reconciliation and having, really difficult discussions about, we have all these people from different backgrounds, in our leadership, in our pastor being from Mexico, so how do we truly reflect the image of what diversity is? And they were tough conversations, but I feel that the outcome of that was a really beautiful thing, where it's not just we're here, we show up, and we acknowledge that there's so many different backgrounds and people from different heritages, and and all of that. But I think a really, it's not just you're a person I sit next to in church. You're my sister. You're my brother. We're family. We respect each other's backgrounds, and being out in the rest of the world. So to hear that this would be, on paper, what's reflective of a multi-ethnic church. It feels. It makes me long for more. It makes me, think back to being in college and participating in gospel choir and missing some of those sounds. It makes me, miss some of those different greetings, miss the food. I don't know if you've ever had pancit or lumpia. Those are comfort foods for me. We didn't have them in my house, but we had them at church, so I know them. So, and I think that really, that experience, that opportunity to grow up in this area, that experience of being in a church that was structured that way by nature, by God's will, I think just kind of set up who I am as a person. So really looking for opportunities to, immerse myself in other cultures, to making a decision to live abroad for a year, wanting to take little moments, when I'm at work and ask families a question that doesn't have to do with, what words do you want your kids to say today? But, oh, tell me a little bit more about that. I didn't know that. Yeah. To make those connections so that, not, I'm a curious person, but also I really seek to understand others. And I think that what we're doing here, having these discussions is a really powerful and beautiful start to what that could end up being.
Yeah, thank you for sharing how that made you feel. I also heard, Cheryl, would you mind also sharing a little bit about kind of that feeling of, this was a part of this series I did not anticipate. I did not anticipate it. I did not think about how it would feel to be a person of color in a church this small, this predominantly white, hearing the conversation at hand. And so, I don't know, would you share a little bit about that?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I have the email that I sent you. So
okay, good, sure. All right, say it. Go for it.
I'd like to read a portion of it. It took me a few days afterwards. I wanted to gather my thoughts. But here goes. Again, just a portion of the email. In all of my church years prior to last Sunday, I never heard a sermon that so deeply addressed the issue of race given by a pastor that wasn't a person of color. During our meeting this past week, in preparation for today, I actually then said that given by a pastor. I should have put a period instead of adding that wasn't a person of color. A little known fact is that it is not always easy for some people of color to hear such messages in mixed groups, as it can make some of us feel more, quote unquote, under the spotlight than usual. Such messages in mixed groups can also cause some of us to brace ourselves for follow-on negative reactions from those becoming more firmly entrenched in their negative beliefs and stereotypes. Regardless, it was a message that needed to be delivered. During your sermon, I experienced a range of emotions, from feeling fully and completely accepted to sadness, as I listened to a message that I knew all too well.
I'm going to just kind of take liberties with this the direction here. What about that did you know all too well? This goes into the question of could we, let's bring, I mean, we took it there, so let's stay there. What about that did you know all too well? What is your story of experience with difference, racism, microaggression, whatever it is? But I want, what is your experience with that? Maybe your earliest memory, maybe your most visceral memory. But I think everybody would love to hear that part of the story.
My life condensed into 2 minutes or less. It wasn't until 5th grade when I was based on some tests they gave, sent to what's called a gifted school, that I literally left an environment that was all African American and went to a school where there were people, or I was the minority, Asians, white students. We didn't have any Hispanic students at the time. All the teachers were white. The principal, interestingly enough, was an African American male. That was my first experience, like I said, being outside of an all black environment. Church, home life, neighborhood, schools, grocery stores, you name it. That was a wonderful experience. And it prepared me for the rest of my life. Because after that, that school was a feeder school to where we could continue in the gifted program in high school. So from North St. Louis, any of you know Missouri and St. Louis, North St. Louis, like a dividing line, black. South St. Louis, white. So I found myself now spending 4 years in Little Italy. That was awesome. That's where the high school was. Again, minority. But it prepared me, and I was very fortunate. I did not experience any negativity because of my skin color. Not at my school, my elementary school, not at my high school. Never. I was never made to feel less than. It was a very welcoming environment. It probably also helped, I can give you the example. Ended up being the student council president.
Wow.
Predominantly white school. Ended up being captain of field hockey team, captain of the girls basketball team. That was just my personality. The first time I experienced racism was when I went with friends to the state championship girls basketball. I went into the restroom, it was my senior year of high school, Jefferson City, Missouri, where the championship was held, and there was a negative comment made by some girls I didn't know in the bathroom who were standing around about my skin color. I felt sick to my stomach. That was the first time in all my life that I had experienced that. I felt sick to my stomach, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's horrible. I went back out to my friends, told them what happened. They wanted to go in and confront them. I said no, but that stayed with me. It was so negative, but I had the crutch to lean on of all of those previous years of positive experience. Moving forward in my life, going on to college, predominantly white school again, going on to law school, becoming an officer in the military, being a lawyer in the military, becoming a full colonel, first black female colonel reserve attorney in the Marine Corps' history. Still, I knew, they called in the Marine Corps when I went through my training, they said, you're green, all of you're green. Well, we're not all green, but that was the way of dealing with that. And I don't know if I have any Marines out there, but we're green Marines. But you knew you weren't green, but again, I didn't feel racism. I felt like if I applied myself, if I did all I could, I'm sure there were people there who might have been. I have not felt blatant racism, but I do know the little things when people kind of look at you a certain way. A snide remark that's made that you know wouldn't have been made about you, that wouldn't have been said to you if you were other, if you weren't of this skin color. It's been interesting even as a federal employee supervising all white teams of attorneys. Fortunately, didn't experience any negativity. But I know I have been very fortunate. I know there are many others who are not as fortunate. I will say to you, I'm married, I have a son who's 17 who just got his driver's license. I'm gonna get emotional here, so I apologize. How many of you know George Floyd? How many of you have heard of Tyree Nichols? I'm not gonna say my son's name, but I don't want you to know his name for that reason. That's my greatest fear with my son driving now. My husband and I had to have the talk with him about being a young black man in America, teen, pulled over, maybe even not pulled over, minding his own business. That's the story that scares me. Even though my life has not been one of great negativity in terms of racism, I've been fortunate in that regard, but it's still there. It exists. I don't know as much as I hoped I would. I did not know what I didn't know until I worked in the Departmental Office of Civil Rights in one of my federal agencies. I was amazed at all I had not learned. Remember all my education I told you about? There were things I learned that as a federal employee in civil rights office that I never knew, that was never addressed in books in school. And now we want to get rid of those things and make it even worse. Again, the bottom line is, we shouldn't know any of those young men's names. That's the backdrop against which I live my life. I don't want you to ever know my son's name for that reason either.
Thank you, Cheryl. Yeah. Would anyone else have a story that you'd like to share of Cheryl just shared her story. What's that hard story of difference, feeling different, of feeling people's aggression?
So you're probably wondering how we got here. I know Cheryl just explained that, but I just had to lighten it up a little bit. But I went to a elementary school a Christian elementary school that actually had people that were Muslim, Buddhist. It was like a non-denominational Christian school. So that's where I went, and had a black principal. Like the classroom was like the melting pot of America. Like one of each ethnicity or race or religion was in the class. So having experienced that, it was, like that was normal to me. Home life, obviously all African American, church life, all African American, but at school where you're spending a majority of the time, it's very multicultural. Fast forward going to the inner city middle school that my mother worked at, where I ended up going, and I was in the gifted and talented program as well as Cheryl. So I went from a very multicultural classroom to me being one or two of the only African American kids in the entire class of, let's say, 28 to 30 kids. I thought that would change, but that was actually how my entire middle school and high school career was. When I played sports with people that look like me, basically, black or white, because I didn't play soccer or any other sports, not, trying to break it out, but that's kind of how the makeup was, the city was. If you were black, you played football or basketball, or you did wrestling. If you were white, you did crew or rowing, you played volleyball, or you did some other sport, or soccer or some other sport that the school offered. So outside of the classroom, it went back to, that you're one of two, but back inside the classroom, I was, one of one or one of two. Through my AP classes, like I was, always looked at as, the kid that was, the Oreo, or the black kid that acted white, because I was, I just was better at school than like other kids, or I tried a little bit harder, or that's just the path that I was on to go to college. So, I kind of accepted that and like kind of internalized it, and just, I just said, like, this is my story, so I'm just gonna, keep going. But it did get to a point where I was getting in, like about to graduate, and I just started, I did not want to stay on that path anymore. I just wanted to, I would tell my mom, I just want to be a regular student. Like, I just want to, be in a regular class. And then that's when I got back to kind of the multicultural type of classroom. But it was a weird feeling, because I still feel like I didn't fit in there. Now going to college, I went to the University of Tennessee. I went there, on a scholarship, academic scholarship. Like, I went there to have the grades, but I can't tell you how many times when people ask me when I went to college, did you play football at the
Yeah.
University of Tennessee? Did you play basketball? Like, oh, were you an athlete? And like I just have a canned response now, like, oh, I'm just like, a regular student, yada yada yada. But that's how I'm seen. Like, I'm 6'1", 300 pounds, but I'm just seen as, oh, you just play sports. Like, that's why you're here. Or, in the workplace, like, oh, you're just the, affirmative action hire. Like, it's not the, it's not like I didn't work hard to get there. It's not like I got there off of my own, know-how. It's like you are here because somebody made a place for you, and this is how you got to this level. And, that's and now that I have a son and a daughter, like, that's something that, like, I don't want them to have to deal with. Like, and I always tell them, like, don't ever let somebody tell you you can't do something. Like, you move forward until the path that's there, like, removes itself, and then you figure out a way to get around it. So that's kind of where I got to this point. So,
yeah. So Brian, you're taking us into a conversation of difference and definitely perceived microaggressions related to how you ended up, but also you're taking us into a little bit of an experience of our scripture, and I want us to kind of end today with this. And I know you're like, we're ending already, but and I would love, Marcos, I specifically would love to hear more of your story. The scripture today, part of the critical race theory, biblical race theory, if any one piece of it is so deeply biblical, it's this need for the counter story. And a word that comes out in critical race theory a lot is intersectionality, that none of us are one thing, right? So all of this difference that you experience is so much about, like, you're an academic, and you're black, and you're a guy that maybe looks like a football player, but maybe you don't play football. Like, it is each one of our experiences. We're not just woman. We're not just African American. We're not just Macedonian. We're not just divorced, right? We're not like that. In the story of the Good Samaritan of the Samaritan woman at the well, like, Jesus meets this woman, and she is a woman. That comes with its own whole story. She's also a Samaritan woman, which comes with its a whole other piece of the story. And then you add on top of that both her Samaritan culture and her being a woman would completely make her the relationships she has been in over the last few years. And we don't know the whole story, but would that make that a completely shameful part of her life, right? So what is, I guess, in this story, as we talk about difference, I just want to make sure everybody has gotten to share what is uniquely your story to tell. What is your story to tell? Yeah.
Right, absolutely. So, as I mentioned, growing up in San Antonio, I was not the minority. We were the majority of Latinos. I grew up Catholic. Growing up, my sexuality was a huge part of my story, and it was told. I went to Catholic school my entire life. And I struggled immensely with that and I'll leave it at that. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. Anyways, coming up here, I most certainly was the minority, and I stood out. Interestingly enough, a lot of people, and not just white people, I mean, a lot of people would come up to me and say, well, what are you? Are you Filipino? Are you Puerto Rican? Are you? And I'm like, no, I'm American. And and it's funny, I don't really like using the term Mexican American, because it's like, I'm American, like, that's just who I am. Mm-hmm. I don't like, and you brought up the term of, affirmative action, like, I busted my butt to get to where I'm at now. Don't view me because I'm the minority. Even at work to this day, sometimes I'm coined as, if they need a diverse story, well, let's ask Marcos, because he's Latino, he's gay, and I'm like, you're checking all these boxes off. And people joke about it, but I'm like, really? Is that what you're viewing me as? And I hear that quite a bit. But also, two more things I want to say. There's a reason why I introduced myself as Marcos Correa, because when I moved here, I couldn't say that name, because people were like, and that's fair enough, people don't speak Spanish, I get it. But what I really, really want to stress, all of that being said, is there's a reason why Chris and I had found, as what we like to say, we found home with this church. Because when we were driving, I think it's on Telegraph, and we saw the sign, and we saw the rainbow sign, and it said like inclusivity. And that's huge for us, as a couple that really just want to praise our Lord Jesus and Savior Christ. We just want to raise a daughter with love and acceptance. That's the bottom line. That was huge for us to be able to experience that and to find a home and find acceptance for ourselves, because that is who we are. That's who I am, and I can never change that. Unfortunately, I couldn't do that in other religions, and I will say that it was difficult for my mom. My dad has since passed, but for my mom in the very beginning, when I told her I was not going to a Catholic church, raised very religious, and she paused. But obviously now she's. That's not the issue anymore. It's just as long as you are finding a home, genuine love and acceptance, and that's who we are, and that's who we hope to, what we want to give to our daughter. And then one really quick final story is several years ago, Chris and I were in a small town in Virginia. I will not name the town. And we were in a parking lot, and we were trying to leave a parking spot, and someone rolled their window down and flat out told us, "We don't let your kind in front of us." And I had never experienced that. And I think I was so taken back, and this person rubbed their arm, in front of us, and I thought, are they looking at you, Chris? Are they looking at me? Are they what do we do? And so we just let them go, but it was to the point where I made Chris pull over because I thought I was going to throw up. I felt so disgusted in myself, and I felt angry. And I'm going to be honest, at that moment, I was so angry at white people because I was like, why the hell? And I was like, wait a minute, don't think that. Why? Not everyone's like that. But I share that story because it almost kind of feel like I'm glad I experienced that, because I realized I can only imagine what people who are not me go through. And even more so, I look at my daughter now, and I'm like thinking to myself, like, I just want is for people to truly look at us as individuals for who we are, for what we stand for, and for love. Maybe that's a perfect world. Maybe we'll never get there. I don't know. But at least here in this church, we have found that so far, and I look forward to what's to come.
Yeah, I want to add something, and I think the way in which your last point connects really deeply with me. I feel like whenever I have to check a box in a form, I feel a little bit of anxiety, because I'm like, well, am I white? It says ethnicity. For me, and especially in the Balkans, right? Ethnicity is a nationality, play a big role, versus here. And so I look at that field, and I think for a while I would just check other and put Macedonian. And now it's half of the time I'm like, who am I? And it's kind of who am I even today, or other stuff. And what's interesting is also how the kids are learning about this, or so the kid's dad is Macedonian and Bulgarian, and the Bulgarian side, it's from Trachea, and it's close to, I want to say Turkish roots, that kind of stuff. So Peter attends a lot more than Annabella does. And he came back from school one day, and he was like, I don't know if he needed to fill out something or something, and he's like, Mom, I'm brown, but how come Annabella's white? And I was like, we're Macedonian American, right? And they are born and raised in America. And I'm like, I don't know how to answer this question. I just genuinely did not know how to answer that question, because I think when you select a certain box, once you're put into a category, and there are assumptions about that category. And so, but it's interesting because I think other people always put us in a box. So I have friends who are white who don't think I'm white enough, and frankly, I don't think I'm ever going to fit into that category. I have friends who are African American, or others from Panama or other countries, and they will say, I don't think of you as white. So I get perhaps my own special little category of Macedonian American, and I may be the only one that they know. But I think that kind of the way in which Carlos wrapped up the story, I think we're all unique. And as unique as we are, I think the things that we actually get together on, for example, here, is that we believe in a Christ that's inclusive. And so maybe that's the only thing that we need to have in common, that we declare, and we don't have to declare certain other things. But I feel like at different moments, there's different parts of our story that play. And I think to dismiss any one of those is to dismiss the richness. So like, and I'll just share this too. In the Balkans, a lot of different cultures had passed through, right? Roman times, there's a road that led through it, Via Ignatia. It's in the Bible, etc. When people were arguing, and I think when the West, through American media lens, saw the Balkan Wars, they were attaching labels like, oh, this is a division based on religion. Albanians are darker than Macedonians. No, they're not, right? This was how the outside world tried to describe something. And I think I'm trying to not do that myself, whether it's for my sake or with my friends, and to just find out what their story is. Because the story can be very different for every single person.
This is why, like, right? This is why a lens of race is so it's unsatisfying. Like, it just doesn't do. This is why there are theologians that would like us to move towards instead of racial reconciliation, like ethnic conciliation, like this understanding that we are all so much more than these big boxes that we have to check. And probably also, I don't know, Carolyn, why you feel so much longing, right? Why is the church such a problematic place to talk about race? Why is it so hard? Why is the church the most segregated place in America still? Because we still are in a lens of boxes and box checking. I mean, the fact that I have to even fill that out I'm just like, it makes me angry now because after hearing your stories that I have to fill this out, right? So, yeah. Does anybody else want to share anything? And I know that this has been a little bit longer, but I wanted to make sure you heard their stories. I would love to move into a time of communion, and I would love for a couple of you to maybe serve communion today. Would you be willing? That would be awesome. But anything else to share today?
I'll just share one thing. And this struck a chord with me. Actually, two quick things. So the first thing is when the church does the teenage thing where they go and experience different religions and figure out if they want to give their self to Christ. Like the church that I grew up in, like you just did it. Like you figured out a time and you just did it. Like I remember when I did it and joined the church, like I did it because my grandmother was getting old and it was something that like the family wanted to see me do. So like I did it.
He's talking about confirmation.
Yeah, sorry, confirmation. Yes,
thing.
yes.
So he's talking about confirmation.
Yes.
How we're going to go on a couple of field trips to like a mosque and to a synagogue, and we're going to take our youth. Yeah, that was just not what you're.
Yes,
yeah.
sorry, but
not teenage thing.
Yes, but with that, my best friend is Jewish, and so like I started studying Judaism, and I started studying Buddhism, and I started, studying all of these other different religions, and I started, I have another friend from college that is a big science guy, so he's atheist, and so, we have like a mixed group of people, and like I've talked to some of my other friends who are like true hardcore like Sunday Southern Baptists, like they're in church 3 hours on Sunday. You show up, you eat the after church dinner, like you go to Mima's house, like the whole like 9 yards, and like when I explained, having these like different friends from like different religions, it was like, the first response was from the Southern Baptist was, oh, they're going to go to hell. And I was like, well, so I'm like trying to rationalize my own faith inside my own head. It's like, so you're telling me if a person that does all the right things, is a kind person, like just goes through life and is just a good, genuine person, just because they don't attend church on Sunday and or read a Bible, that they're going to go to hell. And I was like, I just can't agree and get on board with that extreme type of thinking. And so that was like my one thing that kind of brought me to where I am with my faith in trying to figure out, as Carolyn said, like where I fit in. And then one other quick thing, when I first started dating my wife, she was attending like this out of church kind of Bible group. And so I started going with her as, you know, we got more serious. And like one of the things they had like said to her like on the side was like, oh, can you bring your husband to church on Sunday? You know, we'd really like to have him. Not they wanted to meet me, but they just wanted me to attend church to hit their, as Pastor Michelle said, their diverse quota number.
Oh, Lord,
because the more people that show up and more people that are seen, then whoever's taking attendance can check that box. And so, I mean, long story short, we ended up leaving, but like that was one of the things that, again, made me, you know, take pause and, you know, really, really think like, where do I fit in?
Well, thank you all. We are so grateful to have you and to hear your stories. And only if you just are like, if you feel like there were stories you didn't get to tell, which I know, Alex sent me a text this morning. Those are too many questions, Michelle. That's true. That was completely true. There are more stories for these people to tell and others to tell. So would you ask them their story?